right, good afternoon, actually good evening. It's so light, it's hard to say good evening. So I'm just gonna wait for a couple of minutes to let everybody in and we'll get started. Amy, if you could just let me know when you think we have let as many people in as are in the waiting room, and then I'll get started and then we'll let more people in.
I think you can get started.
All right. So good evening. I'm so excited to be here tonight with these awesome ladies that we are going to be hearing from. This meeting is being recorded and we will actually share it with the community on our social media. So we have 4 wonderful women with us tonight. One is still not on because she was actually, Lily Mae is going to join us as soon as she can. She was on a Smart Cities Mayor Summit with Taiwan, and she's going to join us as soon as she's able to leave that and join us. She said she's been on a Zoom call for 9 hours. So there we go. We'll get started. I want to just introduce our panel, and I will start. I asked them for a bit of information so I can share with you. I'm going to start with Dr. Lucia Martinez Valdivia. She is currently an associate professor of English and Humanities at Reed's College, where she teaches courses in Renaissance poetry, poetics, and humanities. She's currently completing her first book, Common Meter, a revised history of English poetry, 1548 to 1948. And has published essays in various academic journals. Her op-eds have appeared in the Washington Post and in Oregonian. Starting in the fall, she will spend a year as a research fellow at the Stanford Humanities Center working on her book, her next book-length project, a study of what we hear in the mind when we read silently. Exciting. And we have with us also Honorable Jennifer Madden, who was elected to the Alameda County Superior Court bench in June of 2016 and sits in a criminal law assignment in Oakland, California. Prior to serving on the bench, Judge Madden served as an assistant district attorney at the Alameda County District Attorney's Office for 19 years. She last served as the head of the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit and managed a team who persecuted traffickers and engaged the community and law enforcement in training on human trafficking. She's a graduate of the Berkeley School of Law. Judge Madden is passionate about service to the legal community. Since 1998, she has dedicated many hours to the Charles Houston Bar Association and the California Association of Black Lawyers, where she served as president of both organizations. She continues to be an active member of both groups and has mentored a number of young lawyers, law students, and high school students. Prior to service to the community, her service to the community also includes the board of the YMCA, Urban Services Division, and trek to India in 2012 to build houses with Habitat for Humanity. Judge Madden is most proud of her 19 years commitment to volunteering with Charlotte Maxwell Clinic, where she assisted low-income women who live with cancer. And we have Dr. Heidi Heisauer, who attended University of the Pacific for undergraduate and University of the Pacific School of Dentistry, graduating cum laude in 1985. Upon graduation, she completed a residency in general practice at the Veterans Administration Medical Center in Palo Alto. She is an assistant clinical professor at the dental school and has been teaching dental students in the preclinical restorative simulation laboratory once a week for more than 30 years. She has a mastership in education program in the Academy of General Dentistry and fellowship in several other colleges. And she has been active in several organizations, serving as president of the California Society of Dentistry for Children. She loves Castro Valley and has been a Castro Valley Rotarian for many years, and she's proud to have her private practice in Castro Valley. She happens to be my dentist too. And then last but not least, I'm just checking my phone to see if Lily is able. So she will join us as she is able to, but when she does join us, I will share her bio with you as well. She's the currently mayor of Fremont, city of Fremont. So I am honored to be among you. And I just have a few questions. What I'm going to do is just ask a question and I'll call on one of you and then we'll go to the next person and the next person. I can tell you that our young people and all of us look forward to hearing you because you are women leaders that we look up to. Each of you have your own unique experiences leading you to where you are right now. Briefly, please share with us what influenced your decision to choose your current profession and position. Let's start with Dr. Lucia Martinez.
Hi. Yeah. Well, first, just thank you so much for putting this together, Parveen, and I hope somebody gets something out of it. I trust that they will. I found my way into my current profession a little bit by accident, a little bit, I think, through family. I didn't go to college for what I do. I went to Florida State University as an undergraduate and I majored in violin performance. I was a fairly serious classical musician for a decent stretch of my life. But I'd always enjoyed reading English poetry and singing Renaissance music. And so it morphed into a master's degree, which turned into a PhD and now here I am. It was my safety career. It was my fallback career after classical music, which is a kind of shocking thing to say because academia is hard. But it's also the model that my parents set for me, not in English. They are not English majors or English professors, but my mother is an economist and teaches economics. And her father was a clinical professor of psychology as well as a practicing psychiatrist. So it's kind of going into thinking and writing books for a living and teaching is kind of the family practice, I guess. I don't know that I would have ended up here if I'd thought about that a little bit more rigorously when I was younger, but it's what I'm doing now and I think I enjoy it. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. How about Honorable Madden?
Yeah, so I was one of those kids who knew early on exactly what I wanted to do. I think at age 13 and 14, I wanted to be a prosecutor and then I wanted to be a judge. That's kind of what I wanted to do. I was raised by very strong alpha women. So my mother and my grandmother were the primary influences in my life, and they were both very hardworking women. And in the home that I grew up in, I was pretty free to choose what I wanted to do. I played musical instruments, I did sports, I was involved in a lot of activities, and definitely nurtured in an environment where my confidence was built up. And if there's something that I wanted to do, I was always encouraged to do it. Now, we didn't have a lot of money, so my mother had to be creative with figuring out how to get me lessons and how to get me these different opportunities. But she's an amazing person. And I remember a few years ago, we had this conversation about how did you manage to work full time and you're a single parent and just struggling to do all this. And you managed to be at every event that I was at. And she said, I was tired a lot of the time, but I just did it. So I decided to go to Berkeley. I applied to a few colleges and I went to Berkeley and I majored in political science and African-American studies. And then I applied, it seemed like I applied to about 20 or 25 law schools. I decided to stay at Berkeley. And so I did things there to really encourage my love of trial practice and litigation. And I clerked at the Alameda County District Attorney's Office after my second year. And then when I graduated and thankfully passed the bar the first time, California and New York tend to have two of the hardest bar exams. It was 3 days then, it's now 2 days, but I think we had to know like 14 or 15 subjects. It was a lot. And then I started at the District Attorney's Office in 1997 in December. And I was able to do a lot of different things at the District Attorney's Office. And then in January of 2016, I decided to run for election for a judge. And a lot of people don't really understand that judges are elected. Some of us are appointed and then they have to run. And then some of us start out by running. And we're very, very far down the ballot. So a lot of people just don't even know about us. So I remember being at pretty much every farmer's market, every Democratic club meeting, every labor meeting, and you have to raise about $100,000 for a campaign. And I didn't have any experience. So it was definitely me being outside of my comfort zone, but luckily I was victorious. And then I decided to, then I left the DA's office in December of 2016, took a little bit of a vacation, and then I started on the bench in January of 2017, and I've been there ever since. So it's been great.
Yeah, well-deserved vacation, I have to say.
Yes, it was. It was.
That's right. How about Dr. Highhouse? Dr.
Just
Heidi.
call me Dr. Heidi. Just call me Heidi Parveen. Yeah.
Dr. Heidi.
I wanted to be a dentist since about the 7th grade. And I knew early on, I really liked the sciences. And we had a neighbor who was a dental hygienist. And her son and I have been friends since we were 7 years old. So my oldest, dearest friend, and his mom said, hygiene is such a great profession. It's a great profession for women. And my dad said, don't be the hygienist, be the dentist, be the dentist. And so I always had a lot of encouragement from my parents. Neither of my parents went to college, but I grew up knowing I was going to go. And, I think with dentistry, you have to enjoy people because there's really nice people attached to the teeth that you take care of. You have to be detail oriented and like working with your hands and like arts and crafts. And so that I think came about kind of naturally for me. Because I enjoy doing all those little attention to detail things. But dentistry is a great profession. It incorporates both art and science, which works well for me. I also had a high school science teacher who was just a rock star and really influenced me that I could pursue this pathway and be victorious. So, I had a lot of nurturing growing up and I love what I do.
That's wonderful. Let me go to the next question, and I'm going to start with Honorable Madden. As you think about our country's history and practices related to women in the workforce, what are your thoughts about the progress we have made so far? And then in general, what do you believe are some of the challenges that continue to remain?
So, I think if we look at a historical perspective, we've definitely made a lot of strides. As women in the workforce, there are laws that protect us from sexual harassment or anti-discrimination. But, I hear from a lot of moms who work outside of the home that it's still very hard for them to balance working full-time and also caring for their family. I don't have children of my own, but a lot of my friends do. And there's always this constant struggle of trying to do both really well. And, there's the saying about, you can have it all. And sometimes I think, well, maybe you can have it all, but maybe not all at the same time. So I think what we could maybe do as employers is just be more understanding and sympathetic to both men and women. But at least in my friend group, a lot of the women are still doing a lion's share of the work at home and the child rearing and working full time with careers. And I think it's also important for women to carve out a piece of time for self-care. That's very, very important. And I think especially the last year has taught us that. And I always preach that to everyone. And it's really hard to do that, not have any time off and care for the family, and then try to, make time for yourself. So I think that we need to maybe borrow from some of our European neighbors who I think have much better practices when it comes to work-life balance.
That's right. Thank you. How about Dr. Heidi?
I think that historically, women have been more in supportive positions instead of in leadership roles. We were the nurses, not the doctors. We were the assistants and the hygienists, not the dentists. And now I've been a dentist for 36 years, so a very long time now. And looking back at my dental school class, I was one of 20 women in a class of 120 students. We were 2/3 Caucasian and 1/3 Asian. We had one Black student, one Middle Eastern student in my class. I teach one day a week at University of the Pacific Dental School, the dental school that I went to. And the first year class is now 60-40, 50-50% male to female. We are 1/3 Caucasian, 1/3 Asian, 1/3 Persian, more students of color, a few Indian students, more diverse, definitely more diverse, which is wonderful. And I agree with the Honorable Madden that work-life balance is probably one of the most challenging things, because there's many nights when I'm still at work at 8 o'clock at night doing charts and closing up the day. I also don't have children, so maybe I'm preaching a little work-life balance, but if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your practice, your business, your families. And it's very important. I think that is still a real challenge. There was a lot of more chauvinistic outlooks in the past with women in dentistry. I remember going to looking for a practice to purchase and having the doctor say, I'll hire you, you can do hygiene. And I said, well, that's nice, but I'm not a hygienist, I'm a dentist. So I'm either going to do dentistry or I'm not going to do any. Or them saying, oh, hi, Heidi, I'm Dr. Smith, you don't have to call me Dr. Hassauer. That sounds so awful. I think that now, being a woman in dentistry is maybe more of an advantage now, because women are still perceived as kinder, more gentle, smaller hands, maybe a little more nurturing, and in a profession where people are kind of still fearful to go to. I think another challenge with dentistry is student debt. Student debt across the board takes out a lot of people that really can do well in the profession, but they're saddled with this huge hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt load that is a problem in our profession.
That's right. Thank you. As you were talking about, how you were addressed, I often find that if people don't know me, there have been many occasions where I get an email, just well-intentioned, but just the way we think about this profession as a superintendent as Mr. Ahmadi. And, just right off the bat. And I know it's because they haven't met me, but it's just interesting. So I see that Mayor Lily May also joined us. I'm going to go to Dr. Lucia, and then I'll read the question again. Actually, let me read the question so that Mayor May can also hear what I asked was, as you think about our country's history and practices related to women in the workforce, what are your thoughts about the progress we have made so far? And in general, what do you believe are some challenges that continue to remain? So I'll go to Dr. Lucia first, and then I'll go to Mayor May.
And I mean, if I can just really, this is really to high school students who are thinking about college and embarking on that. If I can just give them a brief parenthetical note, just speaking to them about this question of titles and how to address people and how to do these emails. When you're emailing your college professors for the first time, make sure you address them. Whether it's, and the nice thing is that in that context, you can call them either professor or doctor and then their last name, and that's it. You won't have made any assumptions about their gender identity, right? You can sort of push back away from that a little bit. And you can just a little initiation information there for those of you considering college. And I'm so struck by at least what we've heard so far from Judge Madden and from Dr. Hausauer, that I too don't have children. And I know this is a small sample, and I know plenty of very successful professional women with children, but I don't think it's an extraordinary coincidence that at least the three of us so far are in that position. I think work-life balance is absolutely possible. My mother is a professional woman and she had two children and whatever, but it is extraordinarily difficult, I think, to push back against what Judge Madden, you described as really the asymmetrical expectations around women in the workforce. What sort of work are you expected to volunteer for? What work gets labeled as service as opposed to recognized as labor? What work in the home are you tacitly expected to do in your partnership, if you have one, right? And what gets registered and recognized and compensated as work, as labor, and as service? I think that's really important. And the more that sort of that we have begun to have in the professions I'm aware of, at least, women more and more represented, right? That we've had a sort of greater balance of gender representation. With that, I think has come an increased expectation that women will volunteer to do the extra work, that women will serve on the committees, that women will, and on the one hand, you are sort of taking on these leadership roles, right? Which is great. On the other hand, you're being asked to turn away from your primary work, your primary practice, and all of that, and give your extra energy, which you have, of course, and your extra attention, which you have, again, to spare, on this other thing. And is that same expectation there for people who aren't women? I think that's a real question. And so it is this kind of, it's a balancing act, right? How do we make sure that representation is equitable while at the same time not ending up making women do a disproportionate amount of the work? I think that's one of the big challenges that I still see, not only for me, but from what I hear from my friends in other professions too.
That's great, thank you. So before Mayor May starts, I wanted to share her bio with you. Mayor Lily May was sworn in December 2016 as Fremont's first woman and minority mayor in Fremont's 63-year history. She first was elected to the Fremont City Council in 2014. In 2019, Mayor May was nominated to serve on the National League of Cities Policy Committee for Transportation and Infrastructure Services. Most recently, she was appointed as the co-chair for the NLC Transportation Technology Committee. Mayor May served as a school board trustee, is where I met her, in Fremont, to the Fremont Unified School District from January 2008 to 2014. And she's the past president of the Asian Pacific Islander School Board Members Association. And Mayor May also has been a dedicated supporter involved in the community focus group encouraging civic engagement. With that, she grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where she earned a bachelor's degree of science in business from Drexel University, and her professional experience includes over 20 years in the tech industry. With that, welcome, Mayor May. I shared with them where you were just a few minutes ago, so join us, and if you'd like to answer that question.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Amati. Thank you for this opportunity to come and meet with all of you. And I'm honored to be on a panel of such distinguished women. Um, I apologize for running late. I was just on a smart cities panel with mayors from around the world in Taipei. And so it is their morning there. But when it comes to this question, it is very interesting to discuss what the role of women are. And I have some challenges in two ways. I do have to disclose, first off, I have two MIF made in Fremont. They are now almost 24 and 20. So I have a daughter who's an engineer and she lives in Seattle. And I have a son who's an engineer and he's halfway through remote learning from Cal Poly Pomona in engineering also. It's interesting for me because I was born in Chicago, grew up in Pennsylvania. And right now when we talk about the role of women, for us in our city of Fremont, it's interesting that when I ran for council, it was one thing, and I was the 8th woman in our city's history as a councilwoman. But when I ran for mayor, to have people say, is the city of Fremont, which is pretty progressive, ready for a female mayor? And I was like, well, this is a very unusual. We were looking at a female president possibly. And so it was a very unusual. And even when I was elected the first time, to have people ask, you're the only woman with 4 guys, what happens if nobody wants to listen to you? And I said that everybody has a mother, a daughter, a sister, a wife. And I imagine you ask my husband and son, sometimes you just don't get a choice and neither will they. But in all honesty, I mean, since this time period, and it's been a few years, and I'm privileged to be able to be here now in the city for 27 years and to be on the council. But in this last couple of years, we've been able to see a lot of changes, and there's still a long way to go. We've had our first LGBTQ city manager. We've had our first woman LGBTQ police chief. And just in this last election, we had our first Black councilwoman, as well as the first time in our city's history ever that we have a majority women council. And it's pretty interesting. But there's a lot to still address when it comes to these challenges in terms of expectations. There's a lot of things, pros and cons. Not only am I dealing with just the expectations of being a female, but also I was surprised to learn when I was elected as the mayor that for large cities in the US history, I'm the 3rd Asian mayor, woman mayor for big cities. And so when I'm out there, I mean, a lot of the controversies from whether or not I take an action or not take an action has a reflection not just on being a woman, but also culturally. And it's very difficult to straddle this. Right now, a good example I will say right now is we made a resolution, and actually we started this conversation about AAPI hate last year when it first occurred with some of the things with the COVID virus and going out and talking to restaurants, going press releases, doing COVID-19 disparities with my fellow federal advocacy caucuses, Latino caucuses on language access, the Black caucus in terms of COVID-19 disparities. And then since then being active here and trying to work with DA O'Malley and creating awareness of what's a hate crime, getting a hate hotline, doing a resolution here in the city, working on it from the Alameda County Mayor's Conference and having all my fellow mayors, and I have to thank them tremendously for joining me in this conversation and supporting that. But then, some people still say, I didn't see you on TV last night, or I didn't see you on, and they're like, you're not doing enough. And I'm sitting here going, it's interesting as an Asian woman that you're saying we're trying to find what it is to be able to speak up for this, but then you're being judged for being an Asian woman for not doing enough. And so it is a very fine line of what we straddle. And there's a lot of different efforts that we're hoping to be able to include the community on, not just as an Asian woman, but as a woman selfishly also in many different areas. I look at Society of Women Engineers. I look at trying to provide the skills and opportunities for so many of our women students. And I know, Parveen, you and I worked so closely together with so many of our young women at that time across all different ethnicities, and having that access is really important. So I look forward to hearing from all of you today about how we can work on this together. And I appreciate the League of Women Voters for helping to create this awareness. I think that, selfishly as a mom and as a community member, I want to see where it becomes common one day, where women are elected and women are in these roles, so that we aren't having these conversations about how unique this is, where it's just the norm that we face in society.
Right. Thank you. I have to keep saying thank you for giving me the doctor title. I have 2 master's degrees, but not a doctorate, but thank you. Take it as a compliment. So I believe that you did share a lot actually in response to this question, but I'll ask it again in case you want to add anything, any of you. please share some challenges you personally have faced as a woman on your journey, which you have talked about. Anything else that you want to say that's related to, I did hear already, ethnic background, sexual orientation, personal belief, or anything else. If you have anything else to add, this is a time for you to do that, and then we'll go to our next question after that.
I was just going to really quickly add that we have an incredible diversity of not just ethnic cultures, but also faith-based, and trying to be respectful of that. And sometimes not realizing that it is a big difference. Over the years, I have been very fortunate to go to Jewish temples, Buddhist temples, gurdwaras, Muslim mosques. And when I first went to them for many years, it is a common practice. They'll call the men up to the dais, and for the women, they'll pass everything back to me. And I used to joke with the gentlemen that I have a monopoly because they can't come over to my side, but I can go to theirs eventually. But when I became mayor, the question came up because I know that they always have the mayors go up and speak. And so I was trying to figure out what are they going to do this year. And I was very humbled to be able to join them up there. And I didn't think much of it. But when I came off the dais, I had a lot of young women come up and say, "Can I take a picture with you?" And I was thinking, why? And they said, because if this becomes a norm when we see you up there, it also allows us to see something that could possibly be a role that we play in. And so, I mean, I think it's important that whether it's different faith or different roles in religion, that we try to respect those, but then also help to hopefully make some transitions and changes that will lead for future opportunities for others.
I think one of the things that has challenged me most, both on my end, and I think also it's sort of something that can happen to some other women, and it's equally challenging, is that I find it sometimes hard to have relationships, productive, sort of mentor-mentee relationships with other very successful women. I think, and I sometimes come up against this difficulty with students too, especially women students, that the expectations that we have for ourselves are so high that we project them onto women, especially women who seem like us. And so in my case, you know, if you are a sort of lesbian of color, my students have a very high expectation for how I will think and how I will act and how I will behave in accordance with what they think that should look like, right? I've done the same thing to my college professors, to you know, dissertation committee members, that I looked at them and I thought, well, this is what I would do, and you sort of look and sound and think like me, so you should do this, right? And so we sort of project those internal expectations onto other people in ways that can keep us from really connecting productively and fruitfully. And so I think that, I mean, we all know it's 2021, right? We know about implicit bias. We know that it's a problem. But sometimes I think we don't realize to what degree we've really internalized certain habits of thought and habits of feeling that work against having good relationships with other women. And so I think that's maybe one piece of advice that I would urge others not to replicate out there, to be aware of, as they sort of keep growing into this world.
One of the challenges that I had when I was young growing up is that I didn't have any lawyers or judges in my immediate family, my extended family, or really in any of my social networks. Most of my family members were blue collar workers. So I had this idea of being a lawyer because I like to debate. I like to kind of constructively argue, I'll call it. And I always question things. But in terms of having someone who looked like me, or really any lawyer or any judge, I just didn't have that. When I matriculated to being a lawyer in Alameda County, fortunately, when I started in the 90s, there were quite a few judges of color on the bench, quite a few African-American women and other women who served as role models and still serve as role models to this day. Some of the challenges that I dealt with as a lawyer and as a judge is I'm still dealing with sexism and racism, whether or not I have a Black robe on or not. And it's very hard for me to not talk about the intersectionality of race and gender. I have to be very cognizant of how I speak. I tend to kind of have a strong personality. So when I speak, am I going to be perceived as being aggressive or maybe assertive, like some of my male counterparts may be? I've had litigants in the courtroom who call me by my first name, who were very disrespectful, who were condescending. Now, was that just because they didn't want to be there, or was that because there wasn't the person who typically looked like a judge in front of them. I've been told, oh, you don't look like a judge. I mean, is that a compliment or is that offensive? I don't know. I've been mistaken for other people who work in the courtroom. So there are things that we have to still deal with. And we still have to be very, very conscious of our own bias, of the bias of people coming before us. And it's also been a challenge in the last year just to still preserve access to justice, given the fact that the courts have been partially shut down in the last year. So that's definitely a challenge that we've had to deal with. I think our bench has done, and really probably the entire California bench has done a really good job of adopting and being flexible, but it's definitely been a challenge. And it's something that I think we're going to have to deal with at least for the next year, maybe in 2022 as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Judge Madden, I was just thinking of it's happening less and less the longer I'm teaching, but I still occasionally get the assumption that I'm a student and I
Right.
shouldn't be in a room and I
Yes,
don't
you
look like
young.
a professor. And it's
Right.
like, what does that
Right.
mean? Look like a professor?
I don't know. I don't know.
I also get that occasionally where not so much since my hair is not its original color, where a patient will say, have you done this before? Have you done this procedure before? And I want to say, yeah, but could you hold the book open to page?
You have to have a good sense of humor about it sometimes.
So yeah, there still are stereotypes, even though we think that we have gotten beyond some of that. There are still biases and stereotypes that are inherent in people's upbringing and makeup. In my office, I have a hygienist who has worked for me for 25 years, and it is a male hygienist. So we do have some typical role reversal in our office. It works great. I don't see it anymore, but initially people would say, did you hire him? Is he going to do the extractions? No, he's going to clean the teeth. So that is a little, we all have room for growth. And I think that being exposed to, especially a forum such as this, where we see each other in our different roles, not just as women, but as other things, what we have in our makeup, what we're exposed to, we're products of our experiences.
Right. So let me go to the next question. What are a couple of recommendations and advice that you want to share with young women listening to you tonight? And remember, we actually told everybody we are recording this so that we can send it to our schools and our community and post it on social media later on. So let's start with May.
Sure. So some of the things I would say is to be comfortable, related to the last question of who you are. I mean, I find it funny how often that as the mayor, sometimes people see me and then they'll say, what do we call you? And I'm thinking there's no difference between a male mayor and a female mayor. I want to jokingly say Princess Buttercup or something, but
I like
I
that.
just say, Mayor May, just the same as anyone else that you would say for a male or female. And there are some times where there's still feelings like when I'm in certain cultures, when we'll say like a colleague will say, do you want to meet the mayor? And they go shake his hand. And I'm like, well, that's actually me. It's pretty funny. So there's still a long way to go in terms of this. But one of the things that I think is important is to speak up. And that was the question that so many people have asked, is to speak up for yourself and to speak up for others. And it's not always easy to be an upstander versus a bystander. It's hard to go against the norm when you feel like it's something that you're uncomfortable with. I also think that it's really important to find good mentors. And I would say that as a mother and also as having been involved with the schools, how important it is. I was so blessed to have people who were kind enough to help shepherd me through my internships and other things. And those have become people who genuinely have benefited me tremendously in my life. They made such a difference in the role. and just giving me that opportunity to also believe in me, to surround yourself. My mother gives analogy that I would love to share, which is that when you're picking friends, it's almost important for you. It's easier for someone to pull you down if you're like they're on top of a table and you're on top of the table and they're on the bottom. It's somewhat easier for someone to pull you down than it is harder for you to pull someone up. So it's important who you pick as your friends too, so that they are people that, you know, can help bring you up and help work with you and give you that opportunity. So, you know, having mentors, having good positive relationships, and being sure to speak up for yourself and others, even when it's hard, I think are things that I would recommend to young women.
Thank you. Let's see, Judge Madden.
I would tell young people a couple things. One, I would tell them to be sure to create your own opportunities. Sometimes we expect people to kind of bring the opportunities to us. And if there's something that you're interested in doing, seek someone out who's doing the work that you want to do. If anyone's interested in the law or being a judge, any young person can contact me. If I don't have time to meet with you, I'll find someone who can. But, you know, ask if we could just do a Zoom call for 15 or 30 minutes. I would also encourage young people to volunteer in their community. That's always been something that's really important to me. I started volunteering in high school and I still volunteer. I even do virtual volunteering, which is a little bit different now, but I've always done a lot of volunteer work because when I was young, so many people poured into me and supported me. And so I feel that we all have an obligation really, and we should want to give back to the community. And it's a really good way to develop leadership skills. And then also just to echo what Mayor May said, make sure that you have mentors. I've always had very good mentors, and they've ushered me through law school, through college, and then even as a judge, I have a variety of not only peer role models and mentors, but also, you know, people who are retired who have done this work who I can go to if I'm kind of not sure what to do or I need some sage advice. So just be sure that you are comfortable reaching out and asking people for guidance and help.
That's great.
Yeah.
Dr. Martinez.
I would absolutely agree with what Judge Madden just said. Ask for help, ask for guidance, ask for mentorship. I say that as somebody who does not know how to ask for help at all. I'm really bad at it. I like to do all my learning in private behind closed doors, and then I come out and it's like, ta-da, I learned how to do a thing, which means that it takes me a really long time. So if you want to use your time effectively and your energy effectively, seek out that help. I finally have a mentor. I'm 38. I think I found her last year, right? And even then I didn't ask. It was somebody coming forward really generously, but ask. People will not be mad. And if they have time, they will take it. And if they don't, they'll probably suggest somewhere else that you could go. They really do want to help. But I guess I have two things. One is sort of more generally, again, speaking of lessons learned later in life that hopefully will benefit somebody else out there sooner, is to really work on consistently and seriously thinking before you speak. I am really bad at that. I work on it all the time. I have been on stage in various ways, whether as a performer or as a professor, for the bulk of my life at this point. And it was only until like the past 5 years, maybe, that I learned to really think and process before I speak. And I still have a reputation of not being a shrinking violet, I think, as one of my colleagues put it. And my foot is regularly lodged in my mouth, but I've worked on developing the ability to think carefully, even as I'm speaking, and to test things out and to edit and to revise before I go out, because it's a difficult skill, and it is a skill, but the sooner you start working on it, the sooner you will start to master it, and it will help you speak your mind in ways that will be audible to other people, so that you can actually reach them. You can actually understand the important piece of what it is you wanted them to hear. So I think that's one thing. The other thing, and this is going to freak some parents out, and I'm sorry, but just bear with me for a second here. For those of you who are thinking about college, don't worry too much about your major, and don't worry too much about where you go. For some people, as we've heard, right, you know right out the gate what it is you want to do, what it is you want to major in, where it is you want to go to school, and that's amazing. If you know you want to be an accountant, if you know you want to be a dentist, if you know you want to go to law school, and you have an idea of what that looks like, that's great. But as somebody who like, I knew I wanted to be a violinist, and I am not one, and I'm still happy. And so be flexible, and know that, you know, I didn't major in English, and yet I'm an English professor, right? I started at Florida State on a full ride, which took me to Columbia for my master's, which took me to Penn for my PhD. So there really is no kind of, if you don't start out at an Ivy League or a super elite school, you will fail out of the gate, right? If you don't pick the right major, somehow your life will have been wasted. Really seek out what you're excited about and what you're curious about, because that's the main skill you're going to pick up in college, regardless of which direction you end up taking it. And that's what employers will want to see, that you are thoughtful, that you are curious, that you are engaged, that you are alert and thinking and sentient and have thought about things, and the connection between ideas and things and disciplines, right? And I think that's really that alertness and attention. It will transfer, it will make you a more thoughtful and more employable human being. And you can test things out. Like I took my violin performance degree and my half of a master's in English, and I worked at Morgan Stanley for several years, you know, in their technical writing department. So there are any number of possible ways that a career can relate to education. It's not necessarily a linear map, and that's okay. Sorry, parents.
Wait, no, that's I think about how many of us really changed majors, and your you know, the conversation about what it is that you're passionate about. You see people here who have been passionate about what they're doing, but it doesn't always, there's no like right or wrong to get to where you are. And I appreciate that. And especially as right now, as our students are applying or have applied for college, or our juniors who are thinking about next year doing that. Dr. Heidi, how about you? A couple of advice or recommendations for young people.
I think the thing is to believe in yourself. Trust yourself, believe in yourself. You're developing who you are. And if you find something you love, you never work a day in your life. And whether you know that early on or you grow into that position, I believe, you know, trust yourself, trust yourself. Mentorships are wonderful. If you're uncertain, seek out people that you can ask. Try a few different professions on if you don't know. I think that don't be afraid to set the bar for yourself high and map out your plan and come up to that bar. You know, if you change your major or you change your interests, it's not a failure. It's a lateral move. And I think that explore things, because right now the world is your oyster. And after we get rid of this virus, there's going to be a renaissance, and you are going to have all kinds of opportunities, and explore those. And I want you to be wary of the naysayers, the people that say, you couldn't do that. That's the hardest job. You know, I learned how to do the West Coast swing, which is a dance, because somebody told me that's the hardest dance and you couldn't possibly learn it. So trust yourself, seek out positive people, seek out mentors and good advice, and look forward to your bright future.
And if I can just add on, just to tack onto that, absolutely aim even higher than you think you can. I played it safe with my options. I did what I was good at. I was good at violin. I was good at reading books. Fine, whatever. I had pipe dreams about the State Department, about the CIA, about working in government. And I thought, no, I couldn't possibly, you know, that was way too far off. And it wasn't until much later that I learned that was not actually the case. So don't cut yourself off from anything because you think it might be out of reach.
Such great advice all of you have given. So any thoughts that you want to share with parents and guardians in support of our next generation of female teachers, attorneys, judges, professors, mayors, doctors, artists, and scientists? What would be one recommendation or suggestions you have for the parents?
I would say be advocates for your children. There are a lot of situations that can come up, especially with students of color. We have more time, I could go through many situations. I had a guidance counselor who tried to dissuade me from going to Berkeley, and I was the first one in my college to graduate from college. So why would she say that? But I had a very strong-willed mother who always supported me. And so, just always being advocates for your children in every situation, whether it's supporting what their dreams are, supporting any issues that they may have at school, just making sure that they feel loved and make sure that they feel supported, and also just advocate for them that the sky is the limit. Having grown up in very humble beginnings, I had the audacity to, I always dreamed very big, but that was because I came from a family that supported everything I did. When I came to them and said, oh, I want to learn how to play the violin, unlike Dr. Lucia, I was very bad at it. But if I wanted to do it, she found a way to pay for the lesson. If I wanted to play tennis, she found a way for me to support me in that. And all those things have made me a well-rounded person. So always be advocates for your kids.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I would say that let your children explore, because we were talking earlier about different careers, and I think people would be surprised. It's a long story, but when I was young, my mom was studying computer science, and when I wrote a software in school, my teacher actually failed me in it because they thought, no way is a 12-year-old able to do that. And so I started college at 12, which is probably a little unusual, but by the time I graduated, I had a semester of college. And so my mother gave the opportunity for me to be able to prove that I wasn't just cheating, but I had the actual abilities. But with that, I've been a computer science student, I've been in sales, I worked in radio, I used to do competitive analysis and strategy. So I've done all different types of jobs, but what hopefully that your child is learning, much like in this situation right now with COVID, is how to be flexible. And that when I look at some of the situations, I know I have two very different students, and sometimes people look at just the grades. And I tell people that it's not just about an academic score, it's about what you learn about the lessons in life. And I don't consider things to be a failure. I consider them to be a learning opportunity because it teaches you resiliency. I think it's very hard sometimes when I see people who've never faced any challenges and never failed, and to realize that when you face it the first time, it's so devastating. But rather than to say that as a failure, see it as an opportunity to try something different, try something new, and take a different approach rather than giving up. Because I think that resiliency is so important. And it's something that's so needed. And it's important for parents to look at that and see that too.
Yeah, that's great. Dr. Heidi?
I had an amazing, my dad passed a year ago, but I had an amazing dad. He was the youngest of 12 children. My mom was the youngest of 10 children. Grew up in the Depression. Just love your kids. Love your kids. Be there for them. Listen to them. Sometimes listening is what is needed the most. I felt very nurtured, and Mayor May had said, I had a similar situation in college when I was struggling with organic chemistry. And I went to visit my physics professor who was my guidance counselor in college. And I had done well in high school. I got a B in high school. I got 1 B in high school. And he looked at my transcripts and he looked at my first year of college and he said, Heidi, you're just not a high jumper. Why don't you change your major into something wide open like library science? Not that there's anything wrong with library science. I cried. I went to my mom, I cried. She said, I don't know, Heidi, what do you think? And I went and I talked to my genetics instructor at the time. And he said to me, Heidi, do you want to be a dentist? I said, He said, you're going to change your major because of one man's opinion.
Mm,
So that was really, really good advice. That's not really what you expect your parent to say, but I could have totally been derailed from a comment from one chauvinistic, person.
mhm.
So I think it's important to listen and encourage and help your kids to find those mentors if you're not able to do it yourself. But just love and support and be there for your kids. I think that made such a difference for me.
That's great. And Dr. Martinez Valdivia.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've seen more than once is a case where a student is good at something, they've found their niche, they know what they enjoy, they know what they love, and they're getting incredible pressure from their parents to major in something that is more practical or more professional, right? Why on earth would you get a major in Russian literature when there's a computer science major on the table? And those kids, they will do it, they will be miserable. So trust that again, the career and the education, the point, I think for a lot of this, but for kids going into higher ed, but I think also at the high school level too, the point of education is not to train you up for a career. You can choose those paths. You can choose that route, right? The highly pre-professional route. I taught first year writing at Penn, where the mindset is much more sort of pre-professional, sort of everybody's in the business school kind of thing, right? And that's fine. And those were driven students, and that made them happy. But that's not always going to be the case. And it doesn't mean that your student isn't going to, that your child isn't going to do anything with their life. They will find their way. And at a certain point, you have to trust that you've raised somebody you can trust. And I think that's a big piece of it, right? I think the other thing that I've seen that makes me that I think is worth working on is, yes, advocate for your student, but also teach them how to help themselves, how to find their own answers, how to solve their own problems. And yes, part of that is knowing when and where to ask for help, but also it shouldn't induce a panic attack in a student to sort of figure out when office hours are for a professor, or what's the right way to contact my English teacher or something like that, right? They should be able to sort of figure out, what are my graduation requirements? When are the due dates for this application? Without sort of, they know how to use the internet. And sort of really to push them to do some of that work on their own to support themselves, so that when you're not there, they really do feel confident and comfortable in their ability to have a handle on a situation.
That's right. Thank you. This has been such an amazing hour with you all. Let me ask just one question. I don't think I kind of shared this with you, but if you could think of one person you have really been inspired by on your journey, who would that be, if you'd like to share that? And why? As you're thinking about that, I have to say, so much of what you said just resonates with me and my experience as a mother, as a professional, as an educator, as a woman. And just, when we talk about mentorship, every single one of us can use mentors at whatever part of our career. After 32 years, 35 years, you still can depend on somebody you can go to and ask questions and just kind of run things by, because we don't have all the answers. I've learned that there is a lot that you learn every single day. You learn from other people. And just today, I've learned so many wonderful things from all of you. So if you want to share who, if there's one person, I know there are probably a lot, lots of folks that you look up to, but who has inspired you?
For me, I think it's my mom. She was incredibly hardworking. She has a really good work ethic. She's 76 and she still goes to work every day for 8 hours. She really doesn't need to, but I just think she likes doing what she does. And she just always taught me to believe in myself, to advocate for myself. And one of her favorite, or one of her sayings that she would always say is, let them tell you no. So when I was scared about applying for something or going for something, she said, you know, you have to do it, let them tell you no. And I still tell that to students I mentor. And if I'm considering something big, like the campaign that I ran in 2016, you know, I always keep her words in the back of my mind. But she's a prime example of a parent who sacrifices and really gives everything for her child. And so she's always been a role model and someone who's inspired me. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say my mother as well. I think she's been extraordinary. But for some reason, when you asked the question, Superintendent, I went to somebody else in my mind, and that was my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Pickering, who I don't think it's overstating it to say that she really saved my life. And she, just by being there, by listening, and I think it's our public school teachers do such an incredible amount of work to be there, especially when our parents can't, when they want to be there, but they can't. And so I think just having that as a model of patience, because I'm not a patient person, and care, and that ability to sort of listen and also observe, and to try to remember to do those things quietly sometimes to make space for others. I think I would put Mrs. Pickering up there.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Mayor May and Dr. Heidi.
I would probably say originally probably my mother, because she's always been so kind, but actually the person I think that it's interesting, that she'd be surprised if she heard it, is actually my daughter. Because she actually has taken on so many traits of so many parts of our family. I often tell a story that my grandmother had her feet bound. And I think that, you know, from looking at that, and my great grandmother was liberal enough to cut it free. And to my mother, who's just so kind and gentle, she's always been, it's been a really rough year and a half. She's experiencing great dementia. But I'm so glad that she was able to spend time with my daughter, because I think so much of her rubbed off on my daughter. And she's a really good combination from being someone who's so kind and empathetic to others, but then also certainly the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in some sense. She's certainly not shy. I would say she's definitely not a shrinking violet or a tiger lily, but she may be small, because my daughter, I have to tease her, she's about 5'2", so she's about 5 inches smaller than me, but she's certainly very mighty. And I think that it would be foolish for someone to underestimate her, because thankfully she has no problems communicating her strength, whether it's physical or with verbally. And so I think that that's important, because so often, like when I said, you know, we get pushed against the wall and you feel like you want to give up, but to have that courage to be able to voice your concern, even if you're small. And I'm grateful that, you know, she put up with me. And as a daughter of a politician, it is not easy at times, because so many people judge. And I feel bad for my children at times, because people will be like, oh, you probably got this because your mom or the other stuff. And actually just recognizing that she is in her own way a force of nature. And so I'm really grateful that I have an amazing daughter who at times we do butt heads, without a doubt, but we still love each other.
That's awesome. Dr. Heidi.
It's so hard because of course my mom has been just an amazing person. I call her the magnet, because you can't leave her in a room. People are just sucked right to her. You leave her alone for 5 minutes, you come back, oh, this is my new friend, and she's got this many children, and you know, she sees the good in everybody. And if you're her friend for your entire life. And I have learned so many life lessons from her. I wouldn't be where I am at all without her influence, without her guidance, without her friendship. Just to be around her. And she's 96, and I'm very, very just blessed every day. My dad was amazing too, an automobile painter, grew up in the trades, 12th child, came from a house with an abusive father, a mom who raised 12 kids, strong upbringing, strong people with good morals and good self-confidence and self-made people. And I am so grateful and very, very fortunate.
I have to say, Dr. Heidi's mom is just like a magnet. She's amazing at 96. I've seen her experience. So with that, I really want to thank every one of you. I know you are such busy women, professionals, and just giving us this time. I can tell you it's going to have a huge impact on our students who are going to hear it. Like I said, I'm going to send it out, and then hopefully we'll have more opportunities like this. I've been honored to know Dr. Heidi and Mayor May. It was amazing to meet the Honorable Jennifer Madden recently. I'm so glad you moved to Castavelli. We are going to love having you here. And I have been nothing but inspired by Dr. Lucia Martinez Valdivia, and I'm dying to read your books. So anyway, thank you so much. I also want to thank Miss Amy Kayer, who's another role model that I always tell her I'm so proud of her for what she does, and as a mom, as someone who really impacts so much of what we do in education and in our district. I want to thank everybody who joined us, but we will definitely share this as soon as we can in the next couple of days with our entire community. So thank you again. I'm grateful that you gave us this time.
Thank you for the
and have a great
invitation.
evening.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Be well.
Thank
Stay
you so
healthy.
much for
Bye.
doing this to Dr. Parveen.
Oh, thank you.
This has been amazing. This has been amazing. And you always see the good in other people. You're such an advocate for the students in the whole community, and you always look out for children and your teachers, and you are an amazing person. So thank you so much for doing this. You've made such a difference in so many people's lives.
And a great mom too.
Bye,
I've seen you over the years.
everybody.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.